Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Legacy Running Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah, and we are back in our series of the exercises that actually helped move the needle for my clients' labral tear. Today, we're talking specifically about the glutes. This is something that y'all love. Anytime I'm posting, I do like Mary glute miss, like whole glute. There's so many glute exercises on my page. I feel like it is just what lights people up. And if you're watching on YouTube and you're like, wow, Sarah, your background is different. I'm recording in my husband's office, which is fun. We have these like amazing inlet bookshelves that are my husband's grandpa's. So they have been here for literally ever. And they're just displaying all of our stuff. He loves making it ski themed. So just bear with me here. But that will not derail any of the contents or the juice of today's podcast episode. So let's get right into it. We are going to be talking about one of my clients. I'm going to call her Sarah. We're just using Sarah as all of these gals' names. And we're going to go through the exact glute exercises that helped my client move the needle with her labral tear pain. Okay, so Sarah came to me. She was, I can't remember off the top of my head, but she was, I think, 2 years post-op of her hip labral repair. Sarah is a busy mom of two. She lives in Colorado. She actually is a personal trainer. She doesn't do that full time, but she was at like a period of time doing like a lot of personal training and now just isn't doing like as much because she has two young kids and she's doing all of the things. And she knows a lot. Like she knows like the glute strengthening. She knows like the periodization. She knows the set rep scheme. She knows like how to lift. Like homegirl is confident in the gym. And I think like what maybe our framework or our brains would tell us is that someone like this should not have hip pain, because if they are able to recruit their glutes really well, they're not going to have hip pain. And I'm just going to show you how that wasn't necessarily the case with Sarah and what we did instead. For her specifically, she wanted to get back to running 3 to 4 days a week. She does not want to do any races. She's like, I just literally want to run in my neighborhood or with some of my girlfriends or do like different kind of trail runs, like maybe as I have time, and be able to run consistently during the week, run on the treadmill in the winter months, and then maybe run some longer runs, like maybe a 10-mile run on the weekend, and just know that I can do that. And then she also wants to maintain her lifting and be able to just stay strong and stay up to date with that, because she really likes to lift. For her specifically, I said that she was 2 years post-op hip labral repair, which again, I think people would think, wow, at this point, you're probably feeling amazing. You're feeling so much like you're like yourself. But for Sarah's case, she was like, no, I'm still having hip pain. I'm still having hip restriction. And her biggest thing when we went through the discover phase in the Empower Hip program with working together during like our one-on-one call was like, she was just so tight. Like she was so tight into her like hip flexors, anterior hip. It was really challenging for her to drop into a squat because she would get pinching in the front of her hip, especially like when she was coming up. She really lacked that internal rotation, or kind of like that knee coming across and rotating inwards into the body, anything like that. Like reaching over that hip and leaning forward was super tight and painful. And she was also having a little bit of like low back, tailbone tightness and pain as she was kind of just living her life with, post-op labral repair. And when I was working with her, the biggest thing that we found, again, she was tight into like the anterior hip. She was limited into like that bending motion into that, and also into that internal rotation. And those were like her biggest kind of complaints, which was limiting her from being able to run comfortably. She really was not running. Like she was like, I could maybe run like 10 minutes, but like I haven't really even tried because I kind of have just given up at this point. The biggest thing with her that we also found in the discover phase was that she was lifting so much. Like she was doing so much. And I do see this with some of my clients where they're like, okay, on Monday, I do like a full body. And then on Tuesday, I do lower body. And then on Wednesday, I do full body. And then on Thursday, I do lower body and Pilates. And then on Friday, I do this. And it was just like her programming for herself was really short. Like she had these short days because again, she has two kids. She's like working, doing all of these things. And she was like, it's just easier for me to do these shorter sessions. But what she was actually doing is she was lifting legs like 3 to 4 times a week. And even though it was maybe 1 to 2 exercises per time, there was just constant tension. And every time she was lifting, she was trying to do glute exercises, banded glute kickbacks, a ton of squeezing into the glute as she was like dropping down into her squats. Like she was just like, if I can get more glute recruitment, my hip is not going to be as sore post-op, 2 years post-op, and therefore I'm not going to be painful anymore. And the biggest thing that we actually shifted for her was these two things. I'll get right into the exercises that we did, but the first thing was like, okay, we actually are finding that you are doing too much glute work. Like your glute is like so tight. Like anytime someone is telling me that they're having like that low back tailbone tightness, it's like, that's oftentimes like a glute pelvic floor kind of like clenching thing. And then also with her of like not having that internal rotation and not having like that bending or flexion, like we're just too tight in the hip, and we actually need to increase some breathability so that hip could get into those positions with comfort. So the first thing that we did is I said, what if we actually shift your program, and instead of having it be like lower, like you're basically lifting lower body every day, I'm like, what if we have you just lift lower body twice a week? And then you could do like, maybe it's like a lower body day and then a full body day where you're doing a little bit more lower body emphasis, or maybe you're doing like some stability work and then like another lower body day. But basically, like all in all, the specifics don't terribly matter. What if we just decrease the amount of time that you're doing lower body so that therefore you can lift and then your body can have some time to recover? Like if I am lifting my bicep and I'm doing bicep curls every day, I'm actually not going to get necessarily stronger. Well, maybe I'll get stronger, but I'm impeding the gains of me getting stronger or more comfortable through my bicep because I am not allowing to recover. Like I'm just constantly putting stimulus in to break down, but I'm never allowing it to rebuild. So she was never having like that breathability into her hip. So that was the first shift that we made. But in terms of exercises, I actually said, we need to cool it on all of these glute activations. We need to cool it. So we need to stop on all of this glute squeezing, on all of this banded clamshells, on these banded kickbacks, on doing bridges with a ton of squeezing. I was like, actually, what we need to do is we need to focus on lengthening the glutes and allowing your hip to roll back into the socket as you're going into these deeper ranges of motion. So a quick example of some exercises that I gave her, I had her like hold on to a squat rack. She had a squat rack, or hold on to a door. And I'm like, you're just going to drop into as low of a squat as you possibly can, like literally like booty to the floor. And you're going to hold on with your hands. So your hands are going to lower you back down. You're going to reach down and like lean yourself back into that squat to whatever depth feels comfortable. For some people, they're so freaking afraid to go past 90 because everything has told them to not go past 90. But I'm like, if you're holding on with your hands and you're able to rock back into that, you're going to really get good glute lengthening. If you even imagine like when you squat back, or when you when you squat back or like lean forward, imagine like your shirt and your pants kind of separate, like, you know what I mean? Like plumber's crack kind of situation. It's like we're getting lengthening of the posterior structures of the back and the glutes, and we're actually getting like lengthening through those glutes. And then what happens is as my glutes are lengthening, it allows my hip to roll back into the socket a little bit more comfortably and really achieve that like deeper mobility into bending, which guess what is going to transfer into you being able to bending forward more comfortably, to you not having as much tightness into your glutes and allowing the hips to roll back further. Could decrease tightness into the hip flexors, which as you're like going for a run, maybe they're not like on as you start, and then just like aggravating or like recruiting more and more as you go. So the first step for her was just really getting into that like mobility. The next thing we did is like kind of similar to a hip airplane, but a hip airplane was actually irritable for her. So we worked on getting her hip into that like bending position. Now we wanted to work on getting her hip into that internal rotation position. Instead of doing something like the classic internet where it's like 90-90 switches or hip cars where the hip is moving on the body and it can be kind of like scary to get your hip into that position, I said, put your painful leg out. So you're going to like kind of almost do like a runner's lunge forward on your painful leg. And you're just going to twist your body towards that hip. So as my leg is like straight out in front of me and I'm twisting my body towards my hip, my knee is relatively coming across my body because my upper body is twisting on my leg. And I'm getting a relative internal rotation. And what I'm getting is a nice stretching of my pelvic floor muscles. Again, I'm getting stretching of those deep deep glutes, and I'm allowing my hip to get further into the socket, into the roll and glide of that ball and socket joint, that's actually going to help me get into that internal rotation position more comfortably. I often find that this is way more beneficial than like hip 90-90s because you're in control of how far you can go, which I guess you are with hip 90-90s too, but like you're allowing yourself to be in less of a provocative position of like impingement. If you guys have ever been to the doctor and they're like shoving your hip into all these positions, you're basically not reproducing those like tests when you are reproducing those tests when you're doing hip 90-90. But if you're doing something like this, you're allowing your body to just kind of like rotate and get into that position without reproducing those things. What I also love about standing mobility like that is like I'm getting my low back to move into rotation. I'm getting my knee to stay nice and stable. So it's really just coming from my hip, and it's a little bit more functional, controllable. It can feel a little bit less alarming. And if you've had hip pain for a long time, you know that getting into certain positions is super alarming. So I had her work on the like supported squat, dropping down. Again, she's like, well, should I squeeze my glutes on the way up? Absolutely not. Like, stop squeezing your glutes. For her specifically, as you're squeezing your glutes, you're actually just pushing that hip anteriorly and not allowing it to rock back into the socket, which is actually what we need to maybe decrease some of those like impingement or pinchy type symptoms. So the first things that we did to decrease tightness and improve that kind of bending forward or flexion and then that internal rotation or the knee coming across the body was dropping booty to the ground with a supported squat, and then also doing that internal rotation stretch. Honestly, for her, like she was lifting those days a week. We just changed her lifting schedule to just lift lower body twice a week. And then we just added these exercises as a warm up. And then we had her go into her lift. And she was like, oh my gosh, my lifts are actually better because I'm able to drop further into different ranges of motions that feel way more comfortable. And then just some parameters, like for her lifting, I had her just start with bilateral. So I was like, let's just go 2 feet on the ground. Let's do your squat. And then let's do like your deadlifts and like calf raises, stuff like that, where you're not putting a ton of stress through one, but you're like able to just focus. And I said, let's really focus on length. So maybe like with the squat, you're dropping to a box, or with the deadlift, you're like really like leaning and you're trying to get like the dumbbells to your shins. So you're again, like you're mobilizing that tissue, you're getting it to lengthen, and then you're loading it and you're allowing that lengthened tissue to work through a further range of motion, which is just honestly like a huge stretch. Like it's just a huge stretch, vascularization, and works on like the elasticity or like the stretch of the muscle to want to be stretched into that position. And then for her over time, then we started to move into more like unilateral strength exercises. For this client in specific, she actually had really good control and stability. So when we're looking at like single leg squatting and single leg hopping, like she didn't have a ton of instability. Like some people are like freaking noodles out here. This girl, like she was really solid with those things, but it was just, she would get pinching at the bottom of a squat or like into her hip flexors when she was like coming back up. So for her, we started with the like bilateral, so 2 feet on the ground with the mobilization of those deep squats and that like kind of body on hip internal rotation. And then we progressed her to unilateral. So I had her do something like a staggered squat where her front leg is forward and her back leg her front leg is supporting her back leg. And she's basically doing a single leg squat, but I'm keeping her honest with the depth that she's going to. So she's going to like a bench or something where she's working on that stability and she's dropping down and she's again lengthening that tissue without working on any squeezing of the glutes. And she was actually able to do the full like set rep scheme that we needed to build the mobility and endurance into those glute tissues. And then we kind of progressed that body on hip internal rotation to something like a hip airplane. Sometimes this felt good, sometimes this didn't. So this is where that like high touch coaching came in, where it was like, hey, this week it's not feeling good. Let's go back to the body on hip internal rotation. And then another week she was like, hey, this is feeling good. So then we went back to doing the hip airplane. So it was like a little bit more advanced because she's able to kind of work on stability as she is also working on that lengthening. And then as we continued progressing her through the program, we progressed those to like some more strength kind of like exercises. So those exercises that I was just talking about, like the single leg squat and namely like the single leg squat. And I think we also had her do like different like forms of deadlifts and stuff like that. But we really just worked on, once it was comfortable through the full range of motion for a high rep, then we added weight. And then all of a sudden she was strength training through that full range of motion with heavier weight. So imagine like this is the progression she went through. Imagine my bicep is really, 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 really tight. Okay. When I go into full bend or full straightening and then full bending, if I'm doing a 20-pound bicep curl and it's really, 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 really tight, it's probably just going to feel more tight. So what we did basically with her, and if I'm squeezing my bicep, it's tight, 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 tight. So what I had her do was first, we just started with basically like, let's just say even body weight bicep curls of just lengthening that bicep and then shortening it, lengthening and then shortening it. I'm like getting a nice vascular pump to my bicep. And then what I had her do was add a little bit of weight to it and then focus on more stability demand. So maybe I am now doing a bicep curl and like my shoulder is not like resting on something where I'm like supported. And then once that's comfortable, then I'm going to the 20-pound bicep curl. It's like instead of going to just really, really strong strength training, which is making things tighter, I started easy and then I kind of progressed up into that. And then the last thing is that we know she's a runner. Okay. So we know that she wants to run comfortably. So we want to make sure that she has really good stability at her hip, and she does, but let's also just make sure that she can handle the plyometric impact of running. So what we had her do is something like skater hop or a forward hop where she's hopping from side to side and she's having to like hop and stick the landing so that her hip is used to that plyometric demand of having to have my muscles recruit quickly under impact without like any losses of balance. For her, a little bit less for stability, but more for like priming of the muscles to be confident in that demand of running. And at the end of the 12 weeks together, this client made absolutely marked progress. And I feel like the biggest thing is that, yes, she was back to running 3 to 4 days a week. Yes, she was doing some speed work in that. Yes, she was planning to do like a 10K and a 10 miler and even maybe a half marathon later this year. Yes, she got more comfortable with running the hills in her neighborhood with some of the running kind of planning and tactics that we did. But the biggest thing that we realized for her was like, okay, you can strength train. So she just kind of will say discharge the program with like, you're going to continue to strength train lower body 1 to 2 days a week. But the biggest thing for you is that you need to maintain some of those accessory exercises where you're going to continue to work on lengthening the pelvic floor and lengthening the glutes. For her, we know that she gets really like when she gets stressed, it actually just goes a lot into the pelvic floor for her. So one of the things that we kind of found in the program, which again, this is why we need those high touch tactics of getting in there. Like you're not going to learn this stuff on Instagram, but it's like what we found with her was that even if she had an amazing week and it was maybe her cycle, or also maybe it was a more stressful week for her, she would have significantly higher tone and tension into those glutes and into that hip and into the pelvic floor, and she would get more pain. So what we found was not that she was back to square one, but that she actually just needed to go back to those simple exercises of the door jam squat or the squat rack supported squat, and then also like that body on hip rotation to re-get that lengthening. If we're going back to the bicep analogy, it's like she just needed to do that body weight bicep curl or that really lightweight bicep curl before she was getting into her heavy lifting, because she just kind of got through a period of tightness. Like she was just in tightness. And then after the stress would fade or after her cycle would fade, she would go back to where she was feeling a little bit more like herself. And then she wouldn't have to be as proactive with these different like lengthening things. So what are some of the guide rails that we put in for her was like, okay, continue to lift through a full range of motion, stop squeezing your freaking glutes. And then we added in some of her accessory exercises that kind of just that she could focus on throughout the year. It doesn't have to be crazy, but like maybe 1 to 2 a week where she was working on that lengthening. And then if she really needed it in like a stressful time, she was able to add in a couple more of those like mobility lengthening exercises. And that is her plan to move forward. And she really like felt confident leaving the program. We actually mapped out all of the rest of her 2026. She literally had like the most meticulous, amazing schedule of like, okay, this season I am like pushing with running. This season I am pushing with lifting. This season is kind of a rest season. My family's on vacation. We're doing these things. This season is going to be again like a nice, easy maintenance running phase. And this season is going to be where I'm kind of maintaining lifting. And it was just, it's so cool to see someone who like has had a labral tear, had the labral repair surgery, and is like not necessarily feeling like herself, even after going through that, even after going through PT not 6 months, but 2 years post labral repair surgery, and then just feeling like stuck. Like it's like she knew all of the things, like quote unquote, knew all of the things to do, or thought she knew all of the right things to do, but they were actually the things that were like kind of irritating her the most. So it's just so cool to watch her learn this through the program and watch her like really map out 2026 and feel really strong about what she was doing in the rest of the year. And this is just one example. Like I just say this all the time. It's like there are so many really cool exercise options out there. Like even I am just like so fascinated, like working with other clinicians or like being in a gym or even looking on Instagram and seeing all these cool glute exercises and all of these things. But if they're not like tailored to the thing that you need, it's not going to make progress. Like even with this client, when we progressed to the staggered squat, she was still having pinching and through her anterior hip flexor. And we actually had to make some really personal modifications for her that allowed that to feel way more comfortable. And then she was able to make progress. So if you feel like you're like piecing all of these things together, you're like seeing all of these different programmings that you could do, you're like just overwhelmed with it all, and you want this step-by-step approach of like, okay, what are the glute exercises that are actually going to work for me? What's the progression that is going to work for me? Would love to chat with you about the Empower Him program. I'm going to have different opportunities to work with me in 2026. I have one-on-one options, and then also like my beloved group coaching cohort, which is what this gal was in. If you are interested, feel free to fill out the quick application in the show notes below. It's literally like, I don't know, like a 5-question application. And from there, that will link you to my free booking calendar. From there, we can see which or if any of these programs would be a good option for you to work into. Also, guys, like I am not here to like be like, you have to do this. I have had gals where I'm like, you are not ready for this. And like, let's find someone in your area that can get you, a little bit further along so that you can be ready for the coaching program. I've also just had gals that are like, you know what, it's just not my time. And that's okay. But I've also had gals that are like, I'm so freaking like tired of going through all this stuff and not getting the results. And I want to sign up now. So wherever you're at in that process, fill out the application below. Would love to hear from you. If not, or also feel free to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Obviously, you're already here. Would love to have you follow along the journey. I have so many exciting announcements for 2026, and I can't wait to hear from you soon.